So right now I'm going to introduce you to Jordan de Jong. Come up the front, Jordan. He's all mic'd up, ready to go. If you guys have paid any attention at all to the modules, I've done a couple of sessions with Jordan and all the recordings are in the modules. He runs a company called Gameplans. I've taken more than 1,000 calls from people wanting to come into a community, and everyone's question is the same. I don't know what to do. I don't know what type of property to buy. I'd like to retire. I don't know how to get there. What should I be doing? Like all of those questions. Gameplan solves all of those questions, and Jordan is here today to talk to us a little bit about Gameplans and what he does in business.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. That's it. I'll let you at it. That's
Cool.
your water. One's over there.
It's not your water?
No.
Sure?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't mind.
Mine's
Cool, guys.
here.
Well, the introduction's already been done, so I don't need to do too much. But my name's Jordan. I run a company called Gameplans. We essentially do online property portfolio analysis. So we analyze your existing portfolio, and then we do future forecasting over 30 years as well. We work with about 120 businesses, so we predominantly work B2B and work with about 120 businesses across Australia and New Zealand. And essentially we help clients build out their property portfolio. A little bit about me. So I grew up in Sydney. I was there for about 22 years in Kellyville, Baulkham Hills, Bella Vista. Still very close to my heart. I love that area very much. And then I moved to Melbourne. And as you can tell by this is the only visual graphic that I'm going to have on this, is I absolutely hated it. And it was just very cold and rainy and all that terrible stuff. So the good thing about moving to Melbourne, though, is I married my dream wife while I was there. So it was very happy days. And then January this year, we moved to the Gold Coast. And I've been absolutely loving the weather here. It's been phenomenal. This is my daughter, Summer. As you can tell, she's really enjoying that ice cream. And she's my absolute pride and joy. But she's really the reason that I'm here today. She made me realize how short life really is. Like when I held her in my arms and I was like, well, this was me 30 years ago, it really blew my mind. And it really showed me how much little time that we have here on earth. And every single day counts. And so that's what enabled me to ultimately go out and pursue my passion. So what is my passion? It's PPS. And that's all you need to remember from this speech, okay? You've probably already forgotten it, so if you need to write it down, it's just PPS. And we'll get to what that stands for in a minute. But for now, I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey. So what got me started in property? Well, it was this guy. And if you guys can't read the title, it says, "Is this the most annoying man on television?" I think this is the Sydney Morning Herald, I don't know how long ago. And you might all be going, why this guy? Well, this guy's actually my dad. And he started a company called Fantastic Furniture. He knew how to run TV ads, and he very clearly got attention. That was very annoying. I don't know if some of them remember, but they're very full on. But there was ultimately no silver spoon for me. He sold it before it IPO'd, and instead of me inheriting it, which would have been very nice, I had to make it my own way, one property at a time. But essentially, in his later years, he ended up becoming a real estate agent. He sold really high-end properties, so maybe like 10 or 15 years ago, he'd sell like $2 to $3 million in Bella Vista. And those high net wealth individuals became friends, which turned into doing family dinners, which I was forced to attend. And as a 14-year-old kid, it's the last thing that you want to do. But all they would talk about is how they got wealthy. Now, many of them had businesses, but majority of them actually had property. And so I took one thing away from all these dinners, is property equals good. This was also on my dad's bookshelf. It's Steve McKnight's From Zero to 130 Properties in 3.5 Years. Who else has read this book? Anyone? Awesome, lots of hands are going up. So this really opened my eyes to what was possible in property. And so now I had two things that I knew. One was property was good, and I could get 130 of these things in 3.5 years. So what could possibly go wrong? Well, the truth is that this book was actually published in September 2003. I had read it in 2010, so even then the book itself was 6 years old. And the strategies that were applied in that book were from 5 to 10 years prior. And the truth is, and I haven't asked Belinda if I could swear, but I'm going to, shit changed, all right? The game had changed, and more precisely, the lending game had changed. But we'll continue this journey in a moment. And at this point, you might be thinking, all of these slides going to be black and white? There's about 240 of them, and let me ask you a question. Can you be bothered formatting 240 slides? If you can, do you want a job? So what did I remember you to ask? It was PPS. Remember that. So when we talk about property strategy, what do we mean? When we do property planning and we talk about strategizing and building a portfolio, what do we actually mean? Well, there's renovation, which is why we're all here today. Belinda's already done a massive round of applause, but I want to get everyone to give a big round of applause to Belinda. And the team, of course. I know how much hard work goes into all of this, so well done, guys. But what else? So we've got blue chip, which is a capital growth play, or could be a capital growth play. We've got a regional, which could potentially be a high cash flow play. We've got flipping property. We've got timing the market. We've got chasing hotspots, which will probably end up turning into not spots. We've got sit and hold strategies, a generational wealth play. Like, there's heaps of them that are out there, and they all get really, really overused. The problem with having a property strategy is it's thinking about today. What is the best move for me today? But how do we start to think about tomorrow? It comes down to purpose. What is our purpose? And more specifically, when it comes to property, what is this property's purpose? Every property within a portfolio should have a purpose, should have a sole purpose. So an example of that is the purpose of this property might be to be our dream home. It might be to hold on for 30 years. It might be to renovate and keep. It might be to renovate and sell. It might be to buy now and then renovate in 3 years. It could be to offset negative cash flow. It could be to subdivide in 5 years, keep one and sell the other. It could be develop in 6 months. It could be to pass on to my children, or simply be a store of wealth. Again, there are heaps of these. I could go on all day for all the different purposes that are out there, although these are less overused. So how do we determine purpose? With planning. And planning is about thinking long term. We call this future planning, what's happening in the future. But what is the problem with planning? It's the same thing that happened to me. Shit changes, all right? So we can forecast out 10, 20, 30 years, whatever it might be, but stuff happens. We go through economic cycles, we go through demographic trends, we go through international migration, which is going through the roof in Australia at the moment. We go through currency fluctuations, and these are all things that are completely out of our control. So what's the best thing that we can do with planning? Understand where we currently are, understand where we want to be, and take small, actionable steps to get there over decades. So how do we determine where we want to be? It comes down to personal purpose, not goal setting. We do a bit of that, but it's not goal setting, it's purpose setting. What is our individual purpose? And don't say getting rich. Getting rich is an outcome. Being rich is not purposeful. You will all get to a certain point in time where another dollar does not matter anything. So what is purpose? Not having to work 9 to 5 is a good purpose. Providing for my family is a good purpose. Helping others is a good purpose. Buying our dream home is a purpose. And from these purposes, we can then start to target something tangible and work backwards from there. So some examples of these: our family needs 60K a year to live. Our current portfolio is costing us 10 grand a year. Well, we can go, our tangible goal is 60K. Our current situation is negative 10 grand. What is step 1, step 2, step 3 that we can do to make that income? Our dream house costs $2 million. We currently have 300K worth of equity within our existing portfolio. Our tangible goal is we're going to need a 600K deposit for that dream house. And our current situation is we've only got 300K. We can go away. Step 1, step 2, step 3. These are the things that we need to do. But there's one big problem. Most people buy property in this order. 1 is strategy first, which is give me it right now. I want to renovate this property. I can see the potential. I'm going to make 100 grand. It's going to be amazing. I want it now. Purpose comes second, and it's essentially self-fulfilling. So if you go and buy that high cash flow regional property and it comes with a good yield and it's positively cash flow, it's self-fulfilling, right? Like this is a high growth, high cash flow property. Same with renovation. You go out, you buy it, you see the potential, you buy it. I'm going to make you uplift. You're going to have quick uplift within the portfolio. It's self-fulfilling. You've already satisfied what the purpose of that property is going to be. And then planning always comes last. And it's just, I'll retire one day. This income's coming through. I'm going to make 100 grand from this renovation. One day I'm going to be a millionaire. It's all good. But what did I ask you to remember? It's PPS. And what does that stand for? It's planning, purpose, strategy. Planning should always come first. The purpose of the individual asset should come second. And the strategy around that asset comes last. It's simple, PPS. So let's continue on the journey. Back to the lending game. Let me take you back to my first purchase. So this is the first house that we bought back in 2016. All this data information is on the Gameplans platform. I'll take you guys through it halfway through the end of this session. But we did a $6,000 reno, purchased it for $415. Current value is around $650. It's had a 56% growth since we've purchased it, and that's at a compound growth rate of 6.6%. Now, the Australian average compound growth rate for the last 30 years has been about 6.8%. And we've just gone through the biggest boom, or one of the largest booms that we have over the last 3 years in Australia. So, it hasn't underperformed. Belinda's going to tell you off in a second. It hasn't underperformed, but it hasn't been amazing. It hasn't done something incredible for me. Current loan on that's $480, so we have refinanced that a few times to pull out some equity. It's at a 74% LVR. We've got a total equity of 170, borrowable equity of about 40. 420 rental to 3.3% yield. We've got 21K coming in, 28K going out, which means it's negative around $7,000 a year. Property number 2. So we didn't buy this until 2019. I actually picked up Steve's book again in Christmas of 2018, and this is what made me motivated to go out and keep buying property. So this is a 211, purchased it for $480, current value is $640, 33% growth, compound growth rate of 7.5, not terrible. Got total equity of $245, borrowing capacity of $117, got $440 coming in, which is a 3.5% yield. 22K a year coming in, 22 going out. We've fixed at a pretty low interest rate, so it's still neutrally geared for us at the moment, which is great. Property number 3. Bought this one in Sydney in Botany in 2020, so read Steve Vick's nice book, got all energizing and aggressive and started buying property again. Bought it for $473, current value $600. We've had 26% growth since purchasing and 8.2 compounding growth rate. Now, this is in an area that did grow, 12% for houses over the same period as well. So has performed, definitely, but, underperformed considering what else I could have purchased. We'll skip all the loan stuff, but essentially we've got $520 coming in, which is a 4.5% yield. We've got 27K coming in, 32K going out, which means it's costing us around $6,000 a year. Property number 4. There is no property number 4. And the reason there is no property number 4 is Mr. Broker said to me, "You're at your limit." And I said, "What do you mean, limit?" And he said, "Well, you've reached your borrowing capacity limit. You can't borrow any more debt." And I went back to him and I said, "Well, this 16-year-old book says that I can get 130 of these things." I literally highlighted a line in the book and sent it to him. And the truth is shit changed. And to be honest, it was the 2008 GFC, which caused tightening of lending regulations. And I wish I could have blamed Michael Burry, which if you don't know who Michael Burry is, go watch The Big Short. It's probably my favorite movie. But the only person I could blame was myself. I didn't have a plan. My purpose was to get rich, and my strategy was to just buy anything. I hadn't really thought things through, and so I stopped. My wife and I sat down together, and we asked each other the question, what is it all for? What do we want out of property investing? For us, it was to be able to walk on the beach every day. It was to be able to host dinners at our house and have a nice area that we could hang out and host people. have family and friends come and stay with us, so we needed a couple of bedrooms with a couple of kids to make sure everyone was comfortable while they're with us. So ultimately, it was just to live in our dream home. So we planned for it. Our tangible goal was our dream house. Our current situation was that we were maxed out. We sat down, we went, what's step 1? What's step 2? What's step 3? So step 1 for us was find a way to increase our income so that we could increase our borrowing capacity. The other way we could have gone is sell all of the assets and buy something, but we really just didn't. We'd done all this progress and we didn't want to sell the properties. Step 2 was to be able to move to a location that offered everything that we wanted at a decent price point. So if you remember, we moved to the Gold Coast in January this year. We actually rented here for about 6 months. Number 3 was don't buy any more investment properties until we have bought our home. Our plan was set in stone. Our purpose was the dream house, and our strategy was just to wait. It's PPS. So what happened after? In July this year, we settled on our dream home. We moved into Mermaid Waters, which is literally 10 minutes down the road. We're on a canal. We've got an amazing hosting area out the back where we have lots of dinners and people around, and absolutely love it. It's a 5-bedroom, so we've literally had a family member come and stay with us every 2 weeks since we've moved in, I think, which has been amazing, but we have a big family. And so we bought our dream home. And the moral of the journey, or the story, as some people like to say, is understand your purpose for property investing. What is your why? Plan the journey, define a purpose for each property within the portfolio, and then select your strategy. Awesome. Well, I'm going to do a live demo now. I hope you guys liked the little talk that I went through, but essentially I'm going to walk you through the Game Plans platform and everything that we do within the system, how we plan out this over the longer term time horizon. So we're going to start with a bit of a blank canvas. This is going to be someone who doesn't have any properties in their portfolio. We're starting from nil. Some of the questions that we've got answered in here is, we've got a desired retirement age of 62 for this demonstration. Let's just pretend we've got a 15-year time horizon to hit our goal. We want to hit a passive income of 150K, and that's in today's dollars, not inflation adjusted. And we're looking for about 5 properties within the portfolio. I've got 2 individuals in this scenario. They're both earning about 150K a year. We're starting with 140 grand worth of savings, and we're able to save around 6 grand a month. So just a bit of a consensus for you guys and sort of where we're starting. So no properties in the portfolio, and we can have a look at some of the graphs and charts that we've got here. So the first thing that we've got is called our buckets chart, and you guys have got the ability to enter all this data information into the system as well, so feel free to do it for yourself. But what this does is gives us a visual representation of where our money gets distributed. So for this individual, 6 grand of expenses is about 43% of our income, 1,600 on lifestyle is about 11% of our income, and savings at 6,000 is about 40% of our income. This is probably a little bit high. Most people save between 15 to 30% of their income, so I don't feel like it's out of the question. So we can turn that down if we want to as well. The next one is, well, based on those expenses, how much do we need to survive for a certain period of time? So for 2 months, we need about 15 grand. For 3 months, it's about 22. For 6 months, it's about 45, and for 12 months, it's about 91. So some people are really comfortable living month to month, paycheck to paycheck, and they're really happy with that. Other people, as they maybe start to build their family and start to build their portfolio, probably want to have 2 to 3 months worth of expenses on hand. Someone like me, I've got nearly $4 million in debt, I've got a kid, a wife, a big house. Like, I can't sleep without 12 months. 12 million would be nice though, without 12 months of expenses in hand. And then where are we with the current pool? So they've currently got about 140K worth of savings, and then we can see that based on their current expenses, that would be able to let them survive for about 19 months or so. So what we do on the maps page here is really just understand currently where we're at. We're sort of setting the framework from where are we starting from year 1. And we call it the maps page. If you imagine pulling one of the old school maps out and sort of a little pin drop saying like, you are here, we're just understanding where we currently are. What we do on the next page, which is called the compass page, is really the new navigation tools that everyone's got, where we're understanding where we're going, we're understanding where the journey is. And there's lots we can do on this chart, on this page. So I want to take it through very slowly. The first thing that we've got here is growth rates at 5%. Now, as I said before, the Australian average is about 6.8%. The reason we use 5% on the platform, and you guys have the ability to update this if you want to see it at 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever it is because we want to be conservative. We want to show you a realistic number that's going to help you actually achieve your goals whilst being realistic. And look, if property continues to perform at 6.8% or better, then you're going to have a much better outcome. We've got interest rates at 6%, even though they've just gone up, they're probably closer to about 6.5% now. We do want to average that out over 30 years as well because we're using that 6% over a 30-year time horizon. We've got a borrowing capacity rule at 6 times income or 600%. So what this means is generally you take your household income plus 80% of your rent and you can borrow up to 6 times that amount. So for someone who's earning 100K a year, they can typically borrow about 600K worth of debt. Then we've got savings placed in offset. Give me a hand if anyone who knows what an offset account is. Awesome, lots of you alike. For all of you that don't, an offset account is essentially just a separate account that's tied to your loan, and any funds that are in that account will reduce your interest payable. So say you had 500K in debt and you had 100K in savings, well, your interest repayments would only be calculated at 400K. So what we're going to do is factor in all this additional savings that we're accumulating. We're going to place that into our offset account and reduce our interest payable. We're also going to refinance on new purchases. So every time we do a purchase in the future, we're going to refinance 100% of our portfolio back to an 80% LVR and extract that equity and use it as deposits for the next purchase. We've got inflation at 2.5%. I like to keep it between the RBA's bandwidth of 2 to 3%. Some people like to bring it up to 3 just to, again, be conservative. But we've also got an occupancy rate here of 92%. And what this means is we're going to allow for 4 weeks of the year for our property to be vacant. As you guys would all know, or majority of you know, having properties doesn't happen every year, but sometimes every 2 or 3 years we'll have a tenant change hands, and we just want to make sure in that scenario we're not factoring in rental income coming through. Now, there's like 30 or 40 different variables and assumptions or economic indicators that we use within the platform. Again, these are all fully customizable and updatable to what you do. We set some based on the current economic cycle that we see as a platform default, but you have the full ability to do it as well. The main one I do want to show you though is the renovation return at 200%. So what this means is if we plug a renovation into the system, if we put 100 grand into a renovation, we're expecting to increase the market value of that property by 200 grand. Cool. So now this is where we start to do the 30-year forecasting. And the first chart that we've got here is called our offset and annual spends. And this is essentially going to show us over the next 10 years where our savings pool will be. And we can factor things in here like holidays, other spends, car spends, anything that we want to outside of our typical expenses. We could factor them and see how it's going to impact the portfolio. So we're starting with 141K and we're buying a new car this year worth 20 grand. So we're actually down, we're at about 127K. But then year on year, we can see our portfolio start to accumulate, our savings start to accumulate based on the savings rate that I mentioned to you beforehand. And it's all well and good to see our savings pool increase over time, but the real goal of this chart is just to make sure that we stay above our safety net line, which is the dotted line down the bottom here. And this is the number, if you guys remember from the bar charts that we had, that the client said that they were happy to sleep at night with. So it might be 3 months, it might be 6 months, it might be 12 months worth of expenses. So as we're doing future purchases or taking money out for renovations and spending money with everything like that, we want to make sure that we always stay above that line so that we can sleep well at night. Cool, and we can start with a bit of a blank canvas now. The first thing that I wanted to show you is our target is 150 grand. That's what we want to achieve today. But as inflation comes through, we can see that that increases over a 30-year time horizon. And we actually hit, or we're required to hit about 300K worth of passive income in 30 years' time. So our time frame for what we want to do and what our purpose is for property investing is really important as well. And lastly, we've got a total borrowing capacity here of about $1.8 million. That's factoring in both incomes, no rent at the moment, but that's our maximum borrowing capacity. And we can see over time as our wage increases, so we do factor in wage increases moving forward, our borrowing capacity increases as well. The important thing to note here is it doesn't dramatically increase. Yes, it is increasing, but it's increasing by 50 grand a year. And 50 grand a year isn't going to be enough to go out and buy another property. So we were all capped by this number. I know there's going to be lots of talks in terms of structures and everything else like that that's going to allow us to do things a little bit differently as well. But from a general consensus, when it comes to our own personal portfolio and personal name, we are all going to be capped at some point in time. And this is why it is so important that every single property in your portfolio has a purpose. It's okay if they're all renovated, that's fine. But once they're all renovated, what's the use? Are they going to be for growth after? Are they going to be for high cash flow after? What purpose are they going to serve for you? And this is the biggest takeaway that I want you guys to have today. We're all going to be capped out at some point in time. So let's go ahead and start to build out a portfolio. We're going to do a purchase this year, and just because this is a renovation group, I think I must have to do a renovation. We've only got 120 grand in terms of a deposit, so let's say that we are able to get a 90% deposit, use a 10% deposit and get a 90% LVR. Let's say the purchase price is 550 grand. It's a residential property. We're going to go interest only on the loan, 10% deposit. We're going to cap our compound growth rates up at 5, and we're going to say the current rental yield is 4.2%. Now, just by adding a couple of numbers like that, all of our graphs completely change. The first thing that we can see is, and I'll put some more information on here so we can visualize it out, is we've got purchasing costs of about 88 grand. That's the 10% deposit plus 6% for stamp duty, building and pest conveyancing, everything else like that factored in. So we're still left with about 40 grand after this purchase. And the key thing about this is just making sure that we are still above the yellow line. The second thing what we can see is our equity position. So the value of that property today is going to be around 550 grand. And then over 30 years, as it compounds at 5%, it ends up at about $2.2 million. And we can really start to see the effects of compounding come into play in the last decade, where, in the first decade, it only gets to 850. The next decade, it gets to 1.3. And then after that, we get to 2.2. So the big doubling doesn't happen until the last decade. And it's why it's why I'm a big fan of potentially holding onto property as long as we can, as long as it's not costing us an opportunity cost or doing another renovation or something like that. And based on our current debt, we'd have about 495K worth of debt on that. And on the savings rate, we should be able to fully offset that loan by 2030. It doesn't mean we have zero debt. We still have a loan. We're still making repayments, everything else like that. We've actually still got 495K worth of debt. We just do have 552K worth of savings, which means that we can fully offset our loans. And if you guys remember the offset example beforehand, it means that we're not paying any interest on those loans until they roll over to P&I. And finally, the good one is the passive income side of things. So we can see that property is actually going to be costing us around 14 grand a year. Now, that's a combination of interest rates being factored in at 6%, plus on top of that, we've got the vacancy rate, so 4 weeks of the year where we've got no income coming through. And additionally, we're using a little bit of a lower rental yield of 4.2%. The good news is, as we offset that loan and reduce our interest payable, we end up going neutral by 2026. And then once the loan's fully paid off, or fully offset, I should say, we're generating around 20 grand a year. And then over 30 years, we get to about 70K, which if you just give this a bit of a visual cue, it really looks like we need about 4 properties to be able to get closer to our goal over that time horizon. Property, we can do a renovation actually. Let's probably do a renovation. Good for time, which is awesome. So we're going to come in and we might renovate next year. So we're going to select this property. It's now worth 577K next year because we've had a little bit of growth and our rent's increased a little bit as well. We're going to say that we're going to do a 100K renovation on this bad boy, and it's going to be at an 80% LVR as well. And then we've got a post-renovation yield as well. So typically when you do a renovation, because it's a little bit newer or you've added a bedroom or something like that, you can increase the rental yield over time. So let's put in a rental yield of now 5.5%. So a couple of things will happen. That renovation cash portion will come out of the portfolio. So we've got a negative renovation spend of 20K now, which impacts our savings in that year. And the debt that we've allocated towards that, which was an 80% LVR, is now factored in against that loan. But we can see now that we've had a bit of a tick up in our market value. We're now getting to about 800K, and then over 30 years, we're now getting to about 3.2 million. So it doesn't always happen that way in terms of, generally when you're doing a renovation, you're manufacturing equity, right? So you're bringing that equity in a little bit earlier. But if you choose the location right, which Joe will probably speak on at some point in time this weekend, and you get your metrics or values right in the area, like 4 bedrooms generally outperform compared to 2 bedrooms, and you buy a 2-bedroom and it's got a massive living area, you can convert into 4. Sometimes this does happen. And finally, we can look at our passive income, and now we're actually getting to 136K worth of passive income. So just by increasing the rental yield over the next little while, we're able to pay off the debt a little bit earlier, get neutral a little bit earlier from that, and obviously generate a little bit more income over that longer term time horizon as well. Even if we push the limits of this and say we're going to get a 6.5% rental yield though, you can see that one property is never going to get us close to that end goal line. And the final one that I want to talk you through is this borrowing capacity. Now, this borrowing capacity is probably going to be a little bit higher for our target than what we've got today, but we mentioned before about potentially doing 4 or 5 purchases within the portfolio. If you visually cue this, it's probably only looking like we could do maybe 3 as an absolute maximum. So this is why, again, every single property in the portfolio is super important. So now we've got a little bit of equity, and we can extract it to buy a property again. In terms of savings next year, we've got 85K left over. So, if we came in this year and we said that we're now going to do a 650K purchase, and we're really starting to try and be specific with our purchases. We're going to use a 20% deposit now because we can't get LMI anymore, or the banks have said, no, you have to use a 20% deposit. Again, things change. We go through different economic cycles. 18 to 20 months ago, you used to be able to borrow about 7.5 times your income. In today's current economic environment, you're only allowed to borrow about 5 times your income. So we do go through different cycles where you can borrow less or more, and it's really important to get that right. So now we put a compound growth rate of 5 in here, and let's say that this property is going to be a growth purchase. We've got our cash flow purchase, we've done a renovation, we've uplifted our equity, which has allowed us to get into this second purchase, which is really what we wanted from property number 1 because we were starting with a low cash base. So if we come in here and we say, look, this is going to be potentially blue chip, might be sort of a 3.2% yield, but we can bump the growth rates up to, let's say, 6%, for example. Couple of things we can see. The first thing is we actually go negative next year. And that's because, remember, we're doing the 20K renovation, we're spending 10 grand on a holiday, but we've also got purchasing costs of 170 grand right now. And so this is why it's so important to work with a mortgage broker, an accountant, a financial planner, anyone who can really help you on your journey to make these decisions, because there's 2 things that are going to prevent you from buying another property. It's cash and equity, or borrowing capacity. In this scenario, we've got enough borrowing capacity to continue buying in the portfolio, but we don't have enough cash. So we want to make sure that, number 1, the purpose of this property is going to be correct, because we're probably going to have to wait another year or 2 to be able to do this purchase. And so if this is the next purchase within the portfolio, we really want to make sure we're doing it in the right year. So I can push this out to 2025. We'll kind of see where we are. We have another little dip down. We've got 20 grand left over. It's essentially because we've got more borrowable equity in this year. The property number 1's grown a little bit more. And we've got about 50K worth of borrowable equity that we can extract to get into this next purchase. But we're still spending about 170 grand on our purchasing costs. Portfolio value gets to 1.5. Over 30 years, we get to about 6.5 million, and our total debt level reaches 1.1. And then after doing that purchase, the really important thing is we actually go negative about 27K in that year. And so at some point in time, we can't just keep buying negatively geared properties. We're not going to be hemorrhaging 50, 60, 70, 80 grand a year towards our portfolios. So when we come to planning, we want to make sure that we understand what position we're going to be in after we understand the purpose of that property, to make sure that we can afford to hold on to this. In this scenario, the black savings lines continue to increase, which means they had enough savings to be able to sustain a negatively geared portfolio. But you can see here now, on the last property, the renovation that we did at a 5.5% yield, it actually took a pretty good chunk of where our passive income goal needed to be. But with this one, it's really not adding too much to the portfolio, and that's because it's at a 3.2% rental yield. So now we're generating about 180K. So we're about halfway from where we need to be to achieving our goals. And this, again, is why it's so important to understand what each and every single property within the portfolio will do. Because we are now getting close to our borrowing capacity limit. And if we keep buying these heavy negatively geared type assets with a low yield, we might not hit our passive income goal. But what's our purpose? If our purpose is to have a generational wealth play, maybe it's okay to sacrifice not hitting 300K worth of passive income if we're going to have $10 million that we can pass on to the next generation. If our purpose is to give to charities and help other people do things in their life that they want to do, maybe your passive income is worth sacrificing for something more important. And so that's why when we do these plans, we really want to start with purpose. What do you actually want out of property investing? Getting rich is an outcome, all right? So if we do property number 3, and we say we're going to go for 750K purchase now, I'm going to do an example where we go for, again, like a low cash flow scenario. Add that to the portfolio. We can see that we dip down negative 16 grand, but let's just say for argument's purposes, that's where we need to be. We can see that we are getting very close to our borrowing capacity limit. We still have a difference of about 550K, meaning that we could potentially do one more purchase, but this will be it. This will be the last purchase that we do after this one. So we need to be happy with these purchases in the portfolio because the transaction cost of property is so expensive. It costs 3% to buy a property. No, 6% to buy a property, including stamp duty, building and pest, conveyancing, everything else like that. Thanks for laughing, Alana. You just put me off with the 15 minutes. And 3% to sell a property, so agent selling fees, everything else like that. So every single purchase within a portfolio needs to be very, very important. So if we go for property number 4 now, this is our last one. We could borrow about 600K worth of property. And again, we went for a high growth scenario. So a couple of high growth scenarios in there. We've reached our maximum borrowing capacity in 2030, essentially, it looks like, and the banks will say no more. And you can see that over time, the yellow line does come down, which is our debt. But our black line doesn't increase at a rate fast enough where we can do another purchase, which looks like for about another 5 years. So those 4 properties in the portfolio are key. They need to have a purpose. We need to understand what they're for. They need to serve us over the longer term time horizon. In terms of portfolio value, after the total acquisition window, we now get to about 3.2 mil. And over 30 years, we get to about 12.3 mil. That's a combination of some properties being at 5% and other properties being at 6%. Our total debt position gets to about $2.6 million. So again, forecasting out this number is really important because often one couple or one individual in the family will be comfortable with that amount of debt and the other won't. And so before we even start to get into property investing, we want to make sure that everyone is comfortable with the decisions that we're making. And then over the next 30 years, we're not able to pay off the debt completely. We still have $2.6 million of debt because it's factoring in interest only the whole way. But we do have $2.1 million worth of savings, which means we've got an offset debt of about 600K, meaning we're paying interest on about 600K left over. And so if we go for this scenario where we don't have high cash flow, we've gone for blue chip assets, they're at a lower yield, they don't perform, they perform in growth, but they don't have any income coming through, we actually still have debt at that 30-year time horizon. And the other thing too is we don't actually hit our passive income goal. In our worst year here, as we start to stagger down with lower yields, we get at negative 80K a year. Who would gawk at having to pay 80K a year towards their portfolio? Exactly. So, we want to be really comfortable with all the decisions that we're making. And look, this is in 8 years' time. It's not happening tomorrow. It's okay. But when we forecast these things out, We need to make sure that every single purchase is going to have a purpose. So we get to negative 81k in the worst case scenario. We don't go neutral now until 2040. So 18 years of having a hemorrhage towards this portfolio. And we don't even hit our passive income goal. It looks like we reached something like 200k inflation adjusted, which is not our 300k inflation adjusted. So when you hear that old conundrum of cash flow versus growth, the answer is always a mixed portfolio. You can't just keep buying negatively geared high growth properties. If the outcome is a generational play and you've got really high individual incomes and you play a different game, 100% you can do that strategy. But it's not for everyone. And so how do we build a plan that's actually going to get it closest to our goal over that time horizon? Well, I'm going to keep the purchase prices. I'm going to save this scenario. We're going to call it growth. Then we're going to change some things. In property number 2, we're going to come in here and instead of factoring a 6% growth rate and a 3.2% yield, we're going to factor in a, let's say, 5% growth rate and a 4.5% yield. Property number 3, we're going to factor in a 5% growth rate and a 4.5% yield. And then property number 4, we might actually move into a different type of asset class, which is called commercial. You guys might have experience in it, you might not. But essentially, we're going to bring the compound growth rate down to 4, which I know is very low, doesn't always happen like that. But in commercial, we can achieve things like a net rental yield of 7%, and the tenant pays for all of the outgoings. So just by changing some numbers within the portfolio and having a look at all the data and metrics, if you remember from the growth focus scenario where we didn't have enough cash flow, we were actually going negative in some years. But because we now have that additional cash flow coming through, we're actually quite able to stay positive until about 2027, where we're very much on the line. But having cash flow actually helps us on our journey as well. In terms of our equity position, we now go from 3.2 to 9.9. And our total debt reaches a maximum of 2.5, very close to where we were before. And then over 30 years, we are actually able to fully offset our loans. In 2049, we've got about 2.9 worth of savings, and it's fully offsetting our debt. So in this scenario, because we have that additional cash flow coming through, we're able to fully offset our loans. The other cool thing is, worst case scenario, again in 2027, we go to negative 38. Very different to negative 80k a year. 40k a year less going towards the portfolio is very, very important. And the cool thing is we actually hit our inflation-adjusted target in what looks like 2046, and we even continue to go beyond that scenario over the longer-term time horizon. So now we've mapped out 2 scenarios. We've mapped out one sort of growth, an original property, doing a renovation, manufacturing equity because we needed it today, and then starting to stagger between do we continue to go growth or do we continue to go cash flow. I'm going to save this scenario as cash flow. And then we're going to have those 2 scenarios populate in our scenario little system. Checking time. And now what we can do is actually compare those 2 scenarios together. What is the outcome of these 2 scenarios going to be? So in the growth focus scenario, we actually hit about $12.3 million worth of growth. And in the cash flow scenario, we hit about 9.9. So there's a difference there of about $2.4 million over a 30-year time horizon. Our passive income-wise, generally we are a little bit worse off on this final purchase when we do it. And then obviously the cash flow is a lot better the whole way through. We end up getting or generating around 400k worth of cash flow, inflation adjusted. It's probably closer to 200k these days. Within the growth scenario, we only hit 245k, which is probably closer to about 125k in today's dollars. Our total debt is the same portfolio in terms of debt size. And then our cumulative position, which is a combination of the equity in the portfolio and then the after-tax passive income, is a combination of 2 together. And we can see here that in the growth scenario, our cumulative position actually hits 10.2, and our cash flow position hits 9.9. And so they're actually not too dissimilar. They're about 300k difference from where they originally were in terms of growth. So it really just comes down to what do we actually want out of our portfolio? Do we want the $12 million with 4 properties, be able to split that. Say we've got 2 kids, split that, give it to 2 kids. If we're not planning on having kids or don't currently having kids, do we really need a big growth portfolio? What's that going to serve for us? Maybe we want to enjoy the journey a little bit more. I mean, you might be working now and really enjoying your career, and I think that's amazing. But at the same time, if you had a portfolio that was generating a little bit of income for you on top of your career, would that enable you to then start to work maybe 1 day a week less, maybe start to take 3 months of the year off? Just give you more flexibility, maybe step out and start a business like I did. Just give you a little bit more flexibility in terms of what you want to do over the longer term time horizon. And this is what we mean when we talk about our purpose. What is the purpose for each property within the portfolio? What does it serve? What is the data and metrics that we need to do? When can we buy it? And by forecasting these things out, we can ultimately get to by looking into the future, reverse engineering from where we are today, we can ultimately look at where we want to get in the long-term big picture. Cool, guys. Well, I hope that was valuable. I can do like a presentation of sort of the financial breakdowns of each individual property if there's an existing property in there, but Belinda also mentioned there's generally a 5 to 10 minute Q&A sort of session after. So is there any sort of initial hands or questions or anything else anyone wanted to ask? There's one.
Hello, hello, hello. Yes. Have you kept your initial purchases?
Yes, I've kept all 3 of them, and do you know why? I hate transactional costs. Costs 6% to buy and 3% to sell. So look, they haven't underperformed. They're still done okay. If I was buying another property, I probably wouldn't buy any 3 of them again. So in my back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, there could be an opportunity cost towards them. 2 of them are already in Victoria, and Victoria has not performed over the last 3 years. And a lot of people are starting to talk about Victoria now potentially coming up. So just depending on sort of where my wife and I feel we want to be comfortable with, our next purchase will definitely be a commercial asset. And the decision will be, given that we've got the long-term home and everything else like that, when Melbourne does boom, and if it does at some point in time, which it will, should return to the average, do we take advantage of that, potentially offload them, and then put those funds into a commercial asset with some higher income coming through? That's all right. Another question down here, I think. You can do a self-managed super fund. So I can show you. We've got a few things in here. So we've got a whole different bunch of assumptions for the self-managed super fund. We've got a self-managed super fund cap contribution of $27,500. We're going to increase the savings pool in our super by 5%. So that's if you're invested in shares or something like that. We've got a higher interest rate for super, which is generally 7%. Super transfer age, so this is any properties that we buy in a self-managed super fund will transfer over into our personal name in that age. Then we've got our super CGT rate, which is different to our personal names. We pay less tax on selling a property. And then our CGT discount if we held the property for longer than a year. And simply the way you would buy a property in your purchase is you can come into this year. There's a little button down the bottom that says place under self-managed super fund. And if we submit that, we'll essentially see all of the same data. We've got our savings, which is going to be negative because I haven't factored any funds being into super at the moment. But now we will have on our equity position chart 2 more charts, which is essentially our self-managed super fund market value. So we can see the market value of our self-managed super fund come through. And our blue line, which is the savings rate, which I haven't factored any savings in. So of course it's going to go negative. Same thing again on our passive income chart. We will now have a self-managed super fund line comes through. And so I think the age of this individual is set at 0, but if I change this to retirement age of, let's say 25, which would be amazing, what we can see is that self-managed super fund purchase now flicks over to their individual name at the age of 25. So you can add all self-managed super fund purchases in there as well. Cool, guys. Is that a question? Oh, no. Oh, yeah.
Hi, Jordan. Can you please go into details of how you factor in if family wanted to have kids or, helping out relatives or donating money to charities, and how do you work that out in your in the graphs?
Yeah, 100%. So we've got something in the platform called our manually entered spends, and this is essentially where you do anything that you want to do. You can do things in here like purchase properties in a self-managed super fund, sell properties, switch the purpose, which means if you've currently got a principal place of residence and want to change it to an investment. You've got loan switch, so you can move between interest only and P&I. And then we've got alter savings. And what you do in alter savings is essentially exactly what you mentioned there. So we can do things like factor in another car spend, factor in a holiday spend, factor in an education spend, factor in another spend. So to answer your question, if you wanted to donate or give some family members something, you could simply come in here and go negative $30,000. We're going to send that to a family member or donate it. The other thing that we've got in here is our alter savings. So you can do the same thing. You could say if we have a large injection of inheritance or something like that, you could bring it into the alter savings. You could alter your cash flow year on year. So say you're going to get $5,000 from somewhere for the next couple of years, you can factor that in. Say you've got excess debt somewhere else that you haven't factored in against a property, you can do that as well. And underneath that, we have two other fields. We've got change, it's meant to be a spouse's name, spouse one's income, and then change spouse two's income. So you can do both negative and positive scenarios. You can say we're going to decrease spouse one's income by 100%. And what that would do is then factor in a decrease in everything. So we'd have decrease in savings. We can see our savings starts to go negative. We can also see our borrowing capacity drops down significantly as well. So we actually max out on that last purchase, which means we won't be able to do it if that person was to lose their income. But it doesn't always happen, like you lose your income and then there's nothing else. So let's factor in maybe 2 years of not having any income. We can come back into 2027. We can say that we want to reset all of our incomes, meaning that it's going to go back to where they were before inflation adjusted in terms of where they should be in that year. And then it will return everything into the time horizon. So we can see borrowing capacity goes back up, but also we can see where our savings position will be if we factored in not being able to save partner number two's income for 2 years. Does that answer the question? Awesome. Cool, guys. Well, we've got 1 minute left, so has anyone else got any questions?
My question relates to learning the platform. How easy is it? How much time does it take to, because there's a lot of different metrics to go into that.
Yeah, 100%. We try and make it as user-friendly as possible. So as you're going through like kind of the questions and everything else like that, I'm not on the internet, so it's not loading. But we try and make all the questions really super friendly, easy to understand and explain. They should be pretty straightforward for you. When it comes to the graphs and charts, every single graph and chart will have a little video underneath them. So if you click into it and go, want more information, I'm not connected to the internet, so I'll say you're offline. But there's a pop-up video that'll come up that's like 3 to 5 minutes with me explaining exactly what the chart does, the kind of the same way that I have today. So if you do ever feel like you get lost or there's something that you're not figuring out, you can always go and check out those graphs. Same thing with assumptions. So there's a little button here that walks through all 30 or 40 different assumptions and what they do and update the system, so it'll all be in there. I think with any system and software, there's always a bit of a learning curve to understand what you need to do. But as you guys might be able to tell, this is my absolute baby and pet project, and I love it. So if you shoot me an email at 12:01 at night, I'll probably respond at 12:02. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much. That's all right.
It's my mic, Almighty, thank you. A couple of things. Thank you so much, Jordan. Is that a cool software or what? Right, so that answers everyone's questions. What should I buy? How much should I spend? What can I hold? How long can I hold it? What happens if the interest rates go up? What happens if the interest rates go down? You can judge your cash flow all the way along the line. Guys, there are a couple of sessions in our members area from Jordan, so go and look them up. Go and speak to him. He's at the back and he's available for a little while during afternoon tea, so you're really welcome to go up and introduce yourself and speak to him. He is phenomenal at business. There's plenty of support at the back end. Buyers agents all use his software to advise their clients because it's just the easiest way to see and explain to people what they should be doing, what is their next right move, and that's what a lot of people need to know, like what is my next right move. All right, fantastic, everyone. Thank you very much. I can see Phoebe arriving at the back with style stuff. Give her a quick wave while she's there. I thought you'd sneak in, didn't you, Phoebe? So we're going to have some afternoon tea now, but before we go, does everybody see that big sign over there with all the little rare? Branding is everything. So you are so welcome to take your photos against that wall. At the end of every day, including today, I'll be giving a Bunnings voucher away to whoever takes their photos. See the hashtags in the little, see the bright blue little piece of cardboard there? Put them on social media with those hashtags. Well, you might only have to do it once, and you might win your voucher from Bunnings every day, right? This afternoon, tomorrow afternoon, and Sunday. Hashtag, what does the hashtag say, Lance? I'm blind, I can't read from here. 2023 boot camp, hashtag renovation mastery, all right? I've done one that if you want to go and friend me on Facebook and you look at my story, you'll see I've done that today, and at renovate and real estate, tag the business in. That is awesome. A Bunnings voucher every day to whoever's posts I see the posties, gets the Bunnings voucher. Guys, up the back too is Tony and Peter Lee, our accountants extraordinaire. Wave, guys. There you go. You're really welcome to go and meet with Tony and Peter during the break, introduce yourselves. How many people work with Tony and Peter or have spoken to them beforehand? Yeah, quite a few of you in this room. They're absolute guns at property accounting, and property accounting is a lot different than what your average accountant is across. These guys understand property accounting and also renovate themselves, so they really get what we do. When do we have to be back? 3:15, have a big shake of the legs. When we come back, Jessica from J-Ray, Town Planner, will be here with all of you, or answering all of your questions in relation to getting things across the line with local councils, identifying blocks that might be useful for small developments, splitter blocks, etc. Subdivisions, what to look out for and how to go and research those kinds of properties. Does that sound cool? So Jessica will be straight after afternoon tea. Jordan, thank you so much for your session. That was just phenomenal. Guys, I know that from the back of the room, some of that print was a little small. Don't worry about that. Marty has recorded it all, and when it's in the members area, I could see from his screen, it's clear as a bell. Like it's actually zoned straight from the computer. So you'll be able to, if you missed any of that or you felt like you couldn't see those numbers clearly enough just because of the circumstances of this big room, feel free to look in the members area under the recordings of the boot camp and you'll find it there. Not probably Monday, give everyone a few days to get those videos. Monday morning, 9 o'clock, Marty, are you good for it? Yeah, it'll be definitely a week or so, perhaps longer. Marty will keep in contact and I'll put something in the Facebook group when it's up, just to give the guys a chance to download all the content and snip it and edit it and put it up. Does that sound good? Is that a good little first session? All right, let's go and have some afternoon tea, stretch your legs, go to the bathroom. There's coffee machines out there. And see you at what time again? 1:15. You are in the naughty corner.